Here. Oh my goodness. I was having so many issues with my streaming service, so I apologize for being late. But I am really excited to talk about, oh my gosh, remote workers and this whole discussion that Elon Musk email has kind of spurred in this moment. But I am Dr. Wanita Mercer. I am your workplace revival ace. And again, I'm here to give a response to Elon Musk and talk about remote workers and ultimatums. And I told you last time when I did the response to Netflix and their ultimatum for people who don't agree with content and everything that they're working on. I said this is going to happen more often. And I think this is what, 3 weeks that this is now occurring. So again, I say it as a warning. Employees, we're going to start seeing more and more ultimatums in the workplace because that's just where things are going. And it's so unfortunate. As I've said before, it truly is a failure of leadership when you feel like an ultimatum is kind of like your last resort, or really in this case, sometimes your first resort into trying to lead people. And again, we often talk about leadership as being influence, as being power, as being a type of force. But we often forget it's also the ability to motivate people to change. Yeah, to, to walk in partnership with your ideals, your mission, your vision. And we're seeing more and more failure to do that. And so for those of you who are not familiar with Elon Musk and what's going on with him, he basically made an ultimatum to remote workers saying that either you return to work in person or leave. He says, go pretend to work somewhere else. And he also emphasized for a minimum of 40 hours per week. So minimum? Really? Really, Elon Musk? Like, that's where we are now? You're not only giving people ultimatums, but you're also kind of encouraging a sense of overworking in the workplace. Um, because research that I've done has shown that, people are working typically, I would say probably about 30 to 40% of professionals are working well over 40 hours per week, which is, a sense of overworking. Then you get into this whole work martyrdom, where people feel as though um, nothing, the weight of the organization rests on them. That if they don't do it, who will? And that's not a good place to be. I mean, it certainly doesn't benefit your bottom line or triple bottom line. People, planet, and profits, right? Should be our focus and improvement and sustaining in the workplace. And so, you know, I'm reading this and I'm reading different articles to try to get a full spectrum of his thought process in this. And I'm coming across all these things about talking about what a toxic work culture Tesla has, and what a type of they have a flat organizational structure, but it really seems to be steered towards micromanagement on Elon Musk's part. But I do have to give him some credit, and whereby he's saying that, even though he's saying people are pretending to work, this really is targeted to executives at Tesla and saying, listen, people need to see you. I do agree with him that people do need to see the presence of leadership. I absolutely agree. But if it's not going to be a positive or encouraging or motivating presence, then, it might be best that people don't see them. Um, and again, that's not the ideal, but we also have to realize that every executive's presence is not always a positive one or steering the organization in the right way to really create a positive and nurturing work culture. So, from the CEO perspective, you have to kind of take a look at your organization and your people and say, does their presence benefit and build morale and help, boost productivity in the workplace? And if it doesn't, then, you have a bigger problem than people just showing up to work physically. Okay. And then I have to ask these questions too. Is Elon Musk truly opposed to remote work, or is this a way to cut his jobs by 10%? And the reason I say that is because there's also some headlines floating around saying that, with his thoughts on the economy and that the economy is not going well, that he kind of foresees the trouble, and he's basically looking for ways to cut his workforce by 10%. Well, congratulations. This might be the way to do it, um, by people voluntarily stepping away. And then you also have to ask based on, news about the corporate culture and people having to sign confidentiality agreements and so on. Have you really identified and been able to measure poor performance among your office workers, staff, and executives, or is this micromanagement? Okay, so again, these are some questions that I kind of hope he's open to asking himself to really get to the bottom of why he felt the ultimatum was kind of his first slash last resort here. Let me give you some remote work stats because I do want to offer some perspective regarding this as to, is Elon Musk kind of a standout in feeling this way? Is this kind of the status quo in terms of how people feel about remote work? Let's get into it. Well, first, I want you to know that about 30% of workers are still working remotely. Okay. We're not out of a pandemic, even though many people like live that way. They live their life day to day, like as if we're not in a pandemic. We are still in a pandemic. And so I think too that even though CEOs and presidents and vice presidents and, top managers and executives are wanting to continue business operations or get back to the norm as if that is not happening. But you also do have to realize we're still in a pandemic and people still are having a lot of anxiety regarding their safety in the workplace. Okay. Or let's be honest, they were very much demotivated by how perhaps management was dealing with things at the start of the pandemic that made them feel like they weren't cared for. That's just a reality. So I do want you to know that about 30% of, professionals are still working from home. Okay. But here's some other interesting stats that 70% of entrepreneurs and 74 professionals believe that remote work is here to stay, that it's not going anywhere in some shape or form, that this will continue to be a thing, right? Um, there were a lot of professions working remotely pre-pandemic, which we should also be aware of. But certainly, um, where the vast majority of people who could work from home were able to work from home, businesses realized that the work that they thought could only be done in person can actually continue to be done um, remotely. And perhaps it improved business operations in some cases. 47% of employers will allow full-time remote work. Okay, and I think this is important to know too that about 47% of employers see the benefit or see some opportunity, or perhaps at least don't see remote work hurting the business operations. Okay, and will continue to allow remote work. Perhaps even after the pandemic, or we get to the point where it's livable, more manageable. 81% of remote workers think they'd be more loyal to their employer if they offered flexible work. Think about that. 8 and 10 people would say, "You know what? If my employer will allow me to work from home, I have more flexible work schedule or, maybe kinda self-manage myself a little bit more, then I would be more loyal." And perhaps that's because that feels as though your employer is loyal to you as well and helping to meet the needs of your particular life situation, familial issues, or whatever's going on that would allow you to still be a great employee, to do, great work, to excel at what you do, but have the support of your employer and how you get that done. And then we have to know too that 79% of remote workers think that the lack of commuting improves their lives. Okay, perhaps having more time for self care so that you're not having to leave an hour um, just to, get in traffic and get to work. Gosh, I know at one time I was commuting 45 minutes, to work. And depending on traffic, or if I didn't leave exactly at a certain time after work, it could be anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour after work. Then you have to add in the time of getting ready, fully dressed to be presentable in the workplace. Um, Perhaps your work does not necessarily require you to be presentable to people all day long or first thing in the morning. And so you can save time on that too. But I think it's important to also realize that as the economy has changed drastically since COVID, we see inflation, how gas prices have increased so much, that this is also a way to tell your people I care about the change. I can't give you more money, but I sure can make it more feasible for you to do your work and save money on gas by allowing you to do remote work or continue to do remote work. It's a simple solution, right? And then only 3% of people want to work full time in an office. And I think this is important as well to realize that post COVID, people don't want to return to full time work in an office. Um, Perhaps I think with me, I can say too, because I also was one to transition to completely working from home, teaching online to my students in China. And, for me, it was such a relief in a way to kind of reclaim some of my time and how I manage my life um, and so I can see for some people how it was a type of relief, right? And once you get a sense of that relief, it's kind of hard to want to go back to that because, especially for our culture here in America, the culture is to overwork. And that is not healthy. And so, if you want to improve ways for people to continue working and to navigate the changes in their life and still be productive, remote work. Then we also have to realize that 58% of workers would look for a new job if they can't continue working remotely. Listen, Elon Musk, do you hear this? That approximately 58% of your staff could be thinking right now that if this is the ultimatum and you're willing to stand by that, because if you have an ultimatum, you got to be willing to enforce it. If you choose to move forward with this, Mr. Musk, then you're going to probably lose a significant amount of your workers who is always said before, it's cheaper to keep people, right? It's cheaper to lead people and to work with them to get them the change that you want to see to help them be motivated to change rather than giving an ultimatum. Because with them, they're going to take schema, they're going to take knowledge of um, the organization and work processes and culture with them. So be mindful of that. And they're citing concerns for a change in their work life schedule or daily routine, a return to office politics, right? Which could also be a part of getting just typical disruptions, that prevents them from being productive in the office. Health and safety concerns, again, dealing with COVID and having to adapt to working with people or next to people who don't want to wear a mask or maybe who don't want to get vaccinated and kind of maybe you feel a certain way about that, right? So, or just general health, period, and being away from family. Okay. Perhaps this has allowed people to be a caretaker for their parents in a way they weren't able to before. So, again, so many different issues to consider regarding employees. And then we also have to say that, 94% of employers think remote work hasn't hurt productivity. So 94% either say it hasn't hurt or it has at least improved productivity. And that's a big deal. That's a big deal because honestly, even though he's saying go pretend to work somewhere else, Mr. Musk, there is no proof that working from home decreases productivity. Now, if you have measured that among your executives, that's one thing, right? But in generally speaking, where you have so many organizations that have put the time and resources into understanding remote work and what it really means for the organization, these are the things that we're dealing with. And then the vast majority of workers, I think their productivity has either stayed the same or increased after starting remote work. Again, 95%. Because the truth of the matter is, if people weren't productive while, they were in place at work, they won't be productive with remote work either. Okay. Um, but you can expect that diligent workers will continue to be diligent. For more of these statistics, you can scan this QR code. I found a blog site that did a really great job on compiling recent studies about remote work and properly sourcing them. So definitely check that out. So, what are our takeaways from these statistics? And I just mentioned this. One, unproductive in person workers will be unproductive remote workers too, in most cases, or at least improve their productivity, but it's likely not to be declined. Remote workers have invested in their work life. Let's be honest. The organization really is coming out on top here. Whereas people are saving money with gas prices, especially now, initially, they're investing their internet, they're investing their utilities, they're investing, um, a place to work, office space, or should I say, real estate within their home, square footage. They have invested, um, you know, whatever it is to make the workplace, their home environment suitable for working. They're investing in tissue paper, okay? Because they were using yours while at work. And it's important to consider these things that even though they may have more flexible time and things at work, people have invested as well, made a personal investment into making this work. And that needs to be acknowledged. And then we also have to realize that workers thrive wherever they feel most productive, creative, and safe. And that may not be your organization physically. And if it isn't, perhaps you need to be thinking of ways to create that type of environment for people at work rather than feeling like they can only do that at home. And then we also have to realize that it is beneficial for employers to make remote work work. All right. The stats that we've seen so far relay that message. Make remote is a tongue twister. Make remote work work. Um, and it's going to really help boost your organization and the services that you can provide rather than spending so much time on trying to find a reason why it doesn't work. Perhaps the model that we had before COVID is no longer suitable to our culture and the needs now. Maybe the big buildings and the tons of office space and all of that now can be used for other reasons. Maybe we invite people in from the community to now have a space to provide more services, people who couldn't maybe afford to have that space on their own, right? I think that God often creates situations or problems to kind of force us into areas that we should be looking to be in anyway, which in most cases is a great opportunity to help people. So if you have space that's not being used, reach out to organizations who are needing some space. To have employers or provide services to the community that they wouldn't otherwise be able to, right? Let's make that the new thing. So before I go, let me provide 8 tips for leading remote workers. Number one, establish infrastructure for remote work. This is so important. In the 21st century, especially what we've learned from COVID, we cannot afford to not have infrastructure for remote work, no matter what organization you're in. Whether it be as making sure you have the communications, the technology, the budget, the training, the software, whatever it is, make sure that you have the infrastructure for remote work. Today it's COVID. Tomorrow it could be a natural disaster, or it could be a fire or something that has affected, or unsafe work environment that has affected the physical workplace. Right? Don't have interruptions to your work. And it could be grief, right? People dealing with grief or certain life situations where they want to continue to contribute. They want to continue to be effective in the workplace, but you need the flexibility to do that. Next, design remote work for each position, and then let the workers decide whether remote work is feasible for them. Right? As a leader, you design it. You say what can and can be done. This is what you want it to look like. And then go to your workers and say, do you believe that with the discipline that you have, the commitment that you have, the engagement that you have to your job, do you think that you would be able to feasibly do this position with remote work? We're adults. Give people the opportunity to make an informed and mature decision as to what they can and cannot do. And then from there, you hold each other accountable by creating a remote work agreement that details employee responsibilities and company obligations. Let me make this clear. There are things that you expect from the employee, right, with their job, but as employees, right, there are things that they expect also from the company that needs to continue to happen that you would expect to see in the workplace, being there physically, you know? Um, Proper communication, timely communication, support, right? People need to know that you're still making that available to them, even though they're doing remote work. So how will you continue to fulfill that obligation that you have to your employees? It's a two-way street. And I think that perhaps you're not seeing what you want to see from remote workers because they don't feel that they have the support, or that connection to the workplace as they should. Then also provide remote workers with the necessary equipment or a stipend to do their job. Okay. Um, you know, I set up my whole workplace, my at work from home. I'm sorry, my whole work um, equipment and everything that I needed to do to continue teaching. No support. No support for that. That was a challenge. I'm personally committed to providing excellence in my job, right? I would have loved to have seen that same commitment from my employer. It caught I probably it was probably well over, gosh, an $800 investment, to make sure that I had my desk and a place to work and the screens and, different software and things that I wanted to do to be able to do my job well from home. You should provide as an employer, employers I feel like should definitely provide the necessary equipment to help your workers do the job that you want them to do well from home at home, or provide them a stipend to do it. Internet is expensive, even to be able to stream online and do what you need to do online, you need that contract. And I'm hard pressed to find, at home internet for less than what, $75 or so now, past the introductory deal, right? It's expensive. And so those are, again, things that workers are taking on. But if you want them to be able to do their job the way you want them to do it, then make sure they have the equipment. And then, if necessary, determine mandatory yet reasonable in person office residency. And what I mean by that is if you know that the work that you designed for them to do from remote, from home, requires still some residency in the office, then make that known up front. Also, make it reasonable. And if it's mandatory, then you stand by that, right? What are going to be the disciplinary consequences of not fulfilling that mandatory office residency? Um, but make sure it's communicated, right? That people know that, okay, I'm given the flexibility to work from home, but I also know that in-person office residency is 1 day per week, or, you know, a week per month or something. Whatever you feel like is necessary, but also reasonable and justified. Okay. And then also establish a daily to weekly project or workflow management protocol. There's free software, project management software that's available. If your company hasn't already invested in some, I definitely recommend that you do. But let's say you're just a small mom and pop type organization. One of the things I would recommend is to simply have each worker submit their upcoming week workflow and goals and projects that they're working on, so that at any moment you can go to that and get an idea of what people are doing and what their progress is like. For example, one organization that I worked with in the school system, we were all kind of remote, if you will, working in different offices in different locations, but our immediate supervisors were somewhere else. And so, in order to not so much micromanage, but still have an idea what people were working on, we had a meeting at the headquarters every other week, and then sometimes just a morning or maybe even a full day, depending on what was necessary. But then we also submitted weekly reports as to what we were expected to be working on the following week. Okay. And then also checking in with our supervisors regularly to make sure that, things are progressing. And this leads to the fact that there need to be weekly or biweekly wellness and productivity checks. And what I mean by this is wellness is not productivity, and productivity is not wellness. Productivity is simply what are you working on and how are you coming along on it. Wellness is what do you need? You know, how are you managing some of the things that have come up, some of the issues? Are you okay? How can I support you, right, as an employee? And that's so important. Again, and that's going to help develop the relationship that is so necessary between supervisor and employee in this remote work experience. Okay. And then lastly, but certainly not least, appreciate the flexibility and commitment of remote workers, because that's exactly what's happening. In most cases, people are not working less time, they're working more time because of the convenience, and probably even struggling to separate work hours and having its boundaries within their home. Recognize that, right? And appreciate the commitment of remote workers to do their job. Now, if you have people that you're able to measure their productivity, then that's where the performance review um, comes into play. And you take the necessary steps to, create smart goals for those people. And then if they don't meet those goals or complete those tasks, then you take the necessary steps to not renew their contract, or whatever it is within the organization that you have the ability to do. But the important thing here is to lead people. Okay, so Elon Musk, I hope that you take notes here, and that you really take the opportunity to lead your people through these difficult transitions rather than to give them an ultimatum. Again, my name is Dr. Wanita Mercer, and you can follow me for more information, more lives, and responses to headline news at Dr. Wanita Mercer on most social media platforms. I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day. And remember, in everything you do and with everything you have, love God and love people.